They stood pat.
Thank you very much for having me, Martin. Yeah, so today's MAS decision is quite an unexpected one to keep all monetary settings unchanged. And I mean, even especially if we look at the January indicators, I mean, all signs are pretty much to the same direction for on a whole here. I mean, the constraining factor really is core inflation, sticky and elevated core inflation, especially after the December print surprisingly accelerates slightly. I think it really reminds the market that we're still not out of the woods yet. That last mile of disinflation is very difficult, and there are actually more imminent upside risks to inflation in Singapore if we think about the 1% GST hike here, several administrative price hikes here, and do not forget that Singapore is also going to see carbon tax increase by 5-fold. So we're not out of the woods yet. I think that's very much the constraining factor here for the EMS.
This is JP Ong. When you look at it, Singapore itself is very much vulnerable to a lot of these external supply shocks that could exacerbate price pressures, but also you indicated the rise of GST and also these carbon tax, which means that they might keep things tight for the time being. But for how much longer? When do you think might Singapore actually have room to consider a possible loosening of the policy settings around the Singapore dollar to let it trade with a slightly looser leash, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I think this is really the dominant theme that we're looking at for a lot of Asian central banks, especially after the global major central banks are pretty much nearing the end of their tightening cycle, and the Fed is probably going to cut as early as second quarter of this year. For Singapore, I mean, our base case here is for the MAS to start easing in April, but at the earliest, and there also could be quite a lot of risk that could push that decision later to this year, and one of them is really the core inflation here.